Hello and welcome to Afterlife Topics. If you like this type of content, please consider subscribing to the channel or becoming a patron at patreon.com/Afterlife Topics. Hello and welcome to Afterlife Topics Metaphysics. This is Cyrus, and I know it's been a couple weeks since I had any videos up, but, well, I've been on a little bit of a hiatus and basically jumping back into it again. A little busy actually doing work with the Spirit team, and that leads me to tonight's video. So there's a lot of slides we'll have to get through, but it's a lot of, well, I think the most important information I've had up on this channel yet, which means I definitely take some time out to listen to this. And even if you have to maybe open your mind a little bit more, this is information that I've been able to basically corroborate, because I actually have teams of people now who are able to corroborate, well, my guides and speak to them as well. So there's a lot of really cool stuff here to listen to and think about. So with that said, sorry I've been on hiatus, but I am back, and let's get this ball rolling. The dangers of the causal plane, false light teachings, and the timeline crisis. So in this case, we are talking about something that basically people around the community have been talking about for a long time, which are false light teachings, or some of my issues with certain elements of the New Age movement. Well, through a lot of communications with the Spirit team that I've been working with for a long time, well, I used to say really actually my whole life, but communications began most recently, I've learned more about why this is such an issue. I'm going to find out on this video. So to begin going down this rabbit hole, so buckle your seatbelts, let's begin with I first heard of the term causal plane from the communications by a Geraldine Cummins, 1890-1969, in the book The Road to Immortality, whereupon British classicist Frederick Myers came through via Cummins' automatic writing abilities. In this book, Myers describes the need to escape the non-realities and fictions of the regular world to aspire to the mental planes of existence, where all occurs on a sublime level of existence. So this is basically, as I used to conceptualize the afterlife. I always felt a little bit weird about it though. Why did I feel so weird? Well, I always knew there was something that didn't seem completely right about it. As described by Myers, this type of existence sees no fundamental split between mental and physical worlds. Rather, thought occurs in full physical form as fast as the thoughts can produce it. In other words, the causal planes are where you're floating through this kind of prismatic existence of sorts. Human form changes to geometric patterns. Emotions become things, ideas become real, and presented in pseudo-physical form. According to Cummins, all other realities are illusion-based and should be transcended as fast as possible. I first read this book a while back, and again, I really had to try to wrap my mind around it and attempt to just, well, I guess relate to it and believe, well, must be entirely what the afterlife is like, but something didn't seem right. Is this what we all aspire to be? Some kind of a world where thought becomes reality as fast as you can manifest it? Something didn't seem balanced about that. And well, obviously something is still not balanced about that. So most of this sounds good on paper, and it's why a lot of people buy into this as a kind of de facto higher truth about where we go when we die. However, I've long suspected something a bit strange about the philosophical concepts concerning this. Recently, I began my transformation into, well, an automatic writer in a similar style as Cummins, as well as a clairaudient communicator, telepath, channeler, and so forth. I discovered myself entering a world of spirit guides and the exploration of numerous important people in the realms beyond. Those in realms beyond are absolutely delighted when they receive a successful interface communication from this world, which is why it's not difficult to network astrally. This is something that I've been having a lot of fun doing, because I can begin with one person and I can kind of branch off. I can begin with my guide and then attempt to interface, let's say, with my guide's people and go from there to different locations. And this is how I've been able to really accumulate so much knowledge. So let's go into the causal plane. Is this not all it seems? Some of the communicators I began to interface with included groups who consider themselves protectors of humanity. One such group I came into contact with would be called the Ashtar. a name familiar to channelers on the internet and with whom I took great interest in learning about working with and verifying their identities. So the picture you see here, it's a very interesting image that I found. It just kind of, it's like, how do you say it? It's like reality just bending into people's minds in a way. I mean, I think it's a very poetic image and kind of expresses what we're talking about here. The external reality is just blending in with the mental, and there's something kind of jarring about it, right? In terms of verifiable information, going back to some of these communications I've been involved with, I was provided knowledge I was not aware of prior, and this is in regard to these people known as the Ashtar. For example, there was this message that they sent to humanity via a hijacked broadcast signal in 1977, and this was by a communicator named Vrillon. So this is a pretty famous incident, and in essence, I didn't really know about this. In fact, I didn't know about this at all. If I knew about it anywhere, it must have been buried deep in my memory. I began talking to these guys. They began confirming information like this to me, telling me that this was real, we're the Ashtar, we did this. And that to me is pretty good confirmation, but also you have to keep in mind I've gained this interfacing ability, which mediums do possess, where I can see in my mind's eye who I'm talking to, and these are some very, very beautiful and lovely people. So a little bit on the Ashtar, they are 5th, 6th, and 7th density civilizations from the Andromeda Galaxy. And I would say they are immensely beautiful by our standards. And they're a bit shorter than us. And essentially, well, one of the interesting things about them is they kind of say you may need to get used to our voices because they're a little bit shorter than us and they're a little bit higher pitched. So what's interesting about the Ashtar is that they represent many guides and channelers for humans. And they have these kind of amazing artistic presentations that are available on the internet. And I would like to include one, but honestly, I don't want to go off point because some of these images of Ashtarian people, they're so beautiful that even if I include them, I think you guys might be like, what is this, some kind of fantasy novel? But that's how it is on that side. You guys have to remember that. It's like the other worlds, the worlds beyond this one, they have an incomprehensible beauty about them. And we have to fit those elements in as we try to understand these subjects. So let's go on to the Arcturans. These are blue-skinned but commonly mistaken as their gray Zeta Reticuli neighbors. And so the image is, well, Arcturans look like this guy except it's blue. Just go on Photoshop and paint it blue. This is not the only extraterrestrial race, as I'm saying. But it's one of the top ones. Okay, so the Arcturans are peacekeepers in the galaxy, and they also have many guides who are among humans because Arcturus is our closest neighbor. They're not actually called Arcturans because we named the star that, but that is how we refer to them. And you can find channeled messages by them all over the internet. So I began communications with these guys as well. They are very small, 3 feet perhaps, very blue skin, big oval eyes. After I began interfacing with them, they sent a doctor to do healing work on me. And this to me is amazing. I would sometimes wake up at night to hear their tonal language clearly in my room or see those oval eyes staring at me through the dark. As a result of this, various illnesses of mine have cleared up, including my dreaded long-haul COVID syndrome. They are known as some of the greatest psychics. Another group would be called the Angelic Order. So this is my next communication area. They reside in a parallel universe to the so-called astral universe. This universe is of the same fabric that our higher density domain resides, and yet also contains a lower density version of Earth like ours, a parallel of sorts with its own history, copies of us, differences in language and culture, and so forth. This is apparently the universe where many choose to enter and is only one of 3 objective and literal universes in what we call a multiverse cluster. So, the Angelic Order. My first communicator within this order was an angel named Lorna, who often takes the role of Saint Rosa of Lima and provides visions to Catholics. Now, I did not know what this saint even looked like but I soon confirmed via Google image searches that she is the same face as my communicator. So you guys have learned about Lorna already. I know you guys, I have actually had people in the community that I've been able to connect to Lorna with, and been amazing verifications and a lot of amazing experiences since I began communicating with this woman who was my first spirit guide. And she found me basically because I was calling out for help when I was suffering from long haul COVID back August a year ago. If you remember, basically back then I was pretty messed up, and she found me. She found me through different universes and different densities, and then there she found me. And she would lie on my bed with me, her head on my chest, just trying to heal me. And that's why I used to have the strength to get up from that horrible disease and go to the dollar store. I wouldn't know where the strength came from. It was my guides, especially Lorna, right there with me, giving me that strength. And that's a little bit about Lorna, so you might have an idea about her. So let's actually go a little bit deeper, and this is going to be fun, guys. You've seen these pictures before. Do you remember Lorna? So this is basically on the left a channeled painting of her. It looks amazing and too grandiose to be true, but it basically is, well, how it is on that side. Because in her order, that is how she dresses, that is how she looks. And she also takes upon her, let's say, ordinary role in that order as Saint Rosa of Lima. And you'll notice that as Saint Rosa of Lima, they have the same face. So you can actually look very closely at this channeled piece of art. And again, she doesn't even know where this piece of channeled art came from. Like, we know who drew it, but it's like somehow they're tapping into these people, at least this wonderful artist, the South Korean artist is, and is producing this kind of fantasy art. But I was drawn to both of these images. And if you look closely, you will basically see they have the same face, because she told me specifically that she was influencing the piece of art on the right, because this is how they work. They present themselves like this. So Lorna was born Casual Lynn Pamela, 1911. And so interestingly enough, there's a lot of story about her, and she's still a main communicator. And you can see again that amazing parallel. So now let's look at the other angelic order members. We have Radiance, aka Llewellyn, and this is a beautiful painting that I found that could almost look like her. We have Shayla. Maybe we'll talk about her later. In fact, I have a photo of her coming up. And of course, well, the leader of the order. Currently contactable by many in the Afterlife Topics groups, copper dowsing rods are among the best ways to communicate, in fact, with anyone. And that's how I began my communications with this woman right here, as you guys remember, with copper dowsing rods. So this is a good time to bring up the incident that happened with when this communication got hijacked by this Arcturian guy I know, who, well, he meant the best, but he was basically, he did something really, really wrong. And what he did wrong is that he hijacked the communication, because I don't think he even thought Lorna was real. He actually thought that I made her up in my head or something, right? So he thinks because I made her up in my head that he could just come in and impersonate her to teach the community a lesson on critical thinking. But that didn't go so well. And as a result, it sowed a lot of confusion in the community, because the messages that came through were, well, suddenly it went from a real communication, real, and then everyone, including myself, was like, what's going on here? This is so strange. So in essence, that's what happened. And basically, I'm really sorry about that. But since that time, I really feel like I've picked up the pieces, and we can put that whole incident behind us. So, the other angelic order members. We have Radiance, aka Llewellyn, and Radiance was basically, is my spirit guide from a very, very young age. Actually, well, since I was born, because that's how spirit guides work. And on the right is this beautiful depiction, which more or less looks like her. We have Shayla, which I'll have a depiction of her later, and of course we have the leader of the Order as well. Currently contactable by many in the Afterlife Topics groups, the Angelic Order members, well, I first began speaking to them, such as Lorna, through copper dowsing rods, and this is actually one of the best ways to communicate with almost anyone. In fact, if you want to learn how to use them and maybe even how have a communicator come and help you, just find me on Facebook or something. We can probably get together on Zoom sometime. So what I want to mention on that topic is kind of my insurance about this. This is not a typical someone is channeling spirits situation. I am making sure that people can experience them personally with corroboration efforts underway. So in this regard, I want to talk a little bit about what these Angelic Order members look like. Cyrus has no idea how beautiful we really are. Not to sound vain, it's just how it is on the 6th and 7th density realms. People who first come here say it's like a painting come to life, and that's an understatement. So with this beautiful painting, I almost feel like these types of paintings will basically reflect at least a little bit about, well, what they look like, which is honestly, it's beyond my comprehension. And that's really what makes this whole thing really kind of magical to me, because like I'm way down here and I'm trying to imagine what they completely truly look like. And if these stories seem outlandish, consider the many normal people I've communicated to, such as journalists who have told me a great deal about similarities to their world. I talked to my parents. I talked to a woman named Lizelle, who serves as a guide for a member of the Afterlife Topics community, whom I became good friends with. And also 2 Indian yogis, a yogi named Bahabanaba and a yogi named Shamarasha Shamasham, both of whom reside within the ashrams upon what we'd call the highest or 7th levels of the world beyond. So I want to make a quick note. In reference to the yogis, this is a very crisp clairaudient communication plus claircognizant visuals. However, I know very little about Indian yogis in my own life. I just know I can interface with them and they greatly needed to speak to me. Are these names accurate for yogis? It's hard to say, because all communications go through a type of perceptual barrier that can interrupt communications like names or very specific details. Why does this happen? Because if it didn't happen, if it wasn't this way, then, well, basically, people could use a communication like this to win the lottery. And think about how a communication like this could be used as a weapon. It could be used for warfare. And that's not a good thing, guys. So that's why these perceptual barriers have always existed. And it's why mediums are often struggling to get very specific information. And this is something I've learned the difficult way, and I've been exploring it. I even made a video about it called The Astral Blockade. So I still have a lot more I need to learn about this. But that's basically the best way I can put it. So these are the names I was given, and their personalities are completely distinct. And most of all, I'm told they're not even known on our realm of existence at all. So these are yogis from that 7th density version of India. It is no secret in my work I've criticized certain, quote, New Age claims, which is not to say the New Age is bad. The New Age is the New Age. We're living in the New Age, but certain claims aren't so good. So basically, some of these claims are that the purpose of life is to ascend to godhood as quickly as possible, while only using material attachments found in the enjoyments of life as a tool to learn to transcend the attachments themselves. For enjoying those tools as something other than the mere superficial nonsense that they think it is a detriment to progression. My ongoing theme in my books, dating back to 2015's Understanding Life After Death, was basically a message directed to me from the beginning. It is a primary teaching by my people. The misinformation espoused in new, quote, New Age circles is among their chief concerns. So who are my people? My people is a soul group for whom I belong to. They are a species with a type of porous, almost see-through skin, typical, quote, almond-shaped eyes, multicolored bodies, including colors and spectrums we cannot see in this world, like Orla. They communicate by song, they spin and dance around, they're lovely and they're sweet. This group, of course, also joined among my guides and communicators. Their message of warning about the causal plane and similar spiritual movements is in line with the viewpoints of the Angelic Order, the Ashtar Command, the yogis I referenced, and also the Arcturians. What your people call a causal or mental plane is essentially an artificial reality created on a cosmic scale fairly recently. So Radiance is a tall woman around 5'11", golden blonde hair, very East European features, and indeed the white wings someone would expect such an archetype to possess. In fact, truly, it is my theory that she is an archetype, but how do we logically explain these things? To me, she's an archangel. Radiance explains it is important for everyone in your community, Cyrus, to understand concepts like the mental or causal planes. These realms, explained by F.W.H. Myers, with whom I have studied, being Radiance, were birthed into existence only a couple of million years ago. For context, keep in mind Radiance says she is 550 million years old. So, yeah. Many in your world have near-death experiences documented by experiencers like Anita Morjani as one example. This is an example of when one is taken by particular guides directly into realms like the causal plane that we're talking about. And so they report these realms as what the true afterlife is. In fact, this is not true at all. Reality always exists, as Radiance says, in a dual nature between the mental world and the external or physical world. It must be this way. This is a symbiosis, Cyrus. It is how life operates on all levels. The origins of the broken timeline. In Radiance's view, certain very popular yogis who operate in philosophical contrast to the aforementioned yogis, including the Grand Soul group of the Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, are among those responsible millions, really I'd say billions of years ago, I should say, for developing a system of speeding up the path of the advancement of consciousness. This advancement system included the creation of the causal, mental, or plane of flame. The aforementioned guru, Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, although no longer in existence anymore in any tangible form and thus cannot be contacted on the other side, was part of the operation to engineer such realms into existence. So Radiance continues. What this dimension is, Cyrus, is a realm created where there is no distinguishing features between the internal, mental world and the external, physical world as it's perceived. A thought immediately becomes a form, an emotion a shape. There is no awareness of any division between thought and the external. It is still a material reality, yet material substance is materialized instantly and permanently, as fast as people's minds can create it. Okay, next slide. The coming of the manipulated universe. Radiance says, it was no easy feat to create such a reality. Those who created it were of great power, but the purpose was to make a realm to match their philosophies that external reality is a waste of time, a material attachment, something to transcend. In their view, this is necessary to become nearer to God, which to them is the only goal of life. At this point, it is important to stress that my communications are nearly as clear in my mind as a Zoom call. Although communication barriers do exist, as we talked about the astral blockade, the essence of what I am told is clear and distinct. Radiance continues. My people were in absolute shock at the manipulation of reality to create this type of existence. Ever since that time, groups across the cosmos claim the causal plane is the real type of existence. However, this is a deception reinforced by a type of seventh density religious philosophy, with which became a dictatorial minority on our highest levels of being, which would be the seventh density realm. This was such a disaster from a cosmological perspective of reality engineering that we were forced to create an entirely new timeline of a vast scale to rescue people from ending up in such a place. This is a timeline that we must work hard to preserve, or else a great tragedy will occur. And it will occur. So what is wrong with the causal plane? At this point, some may be curious why such beautiful descriptions of realms like this one bear any issue. After all, some teachers in the New Age movement, which is not to say the New Age movement is bad, just certain elements of it that I don't agree with. If you've read my books, you know what I'm talking about. Fervently decry that this is the true existence for which we must aspire to achieve. Radiance begs to differ. There are a couple of very serious things happening. Firstly, those taken to these realms are shown amazing love and peace and acceptance. Any 7th level being can provide enormous transcendent beauty into the minds of a young soul, or even an old soul, any soul, entering our realm for the first time. But this does not hold bearing on the objective truth of how sustainable an existence like this can be. Unfortunately, this grand experience of pure love, well, it tends to gradually condition new arrivals into their way of thinking. I mean, how could something full of so much love be bad, right? One of my guides, the Archangel Shayla, says, and this is a beautiful depiction I found online that pretty much looks exactly how Shayla looks. In fact, Shayla, who is definitely watching this right now, is pretty much laughing hysterically because I found this image of her, and she's like, "How did you find this image of me?" Shayla says, those people controlling these rules truly believe in their creation, so much they cannot see the massive problems it creates. For you see, it is unnatural to form a realm of existence where thought and materiality are the same. These mental realms allow for instantaneous materialization of objects out of ideas. After a period of time, these realms become unstable, collapse, and basically destroy themselves. However, they are instantly reset to eventually just crash and fall apart again. Archangels Radiance and Shayla sum it up. It's an unnatural world created from an intention to send people on a direct pathway to their final plan. Cut. Thank you for your prayers. So let's talk about the end goal and a quick note about the image. Again, a beautiful image that I picked out. Well, actually we picked out. And it shows kind of the way these ideas just spin and distort and slowly kind of percolate into the mind. And you think it's beautiful, but you don't understand the full context of what these ideas can do to your soul. And that is what we are fighting about. My communicators make it clear. Anyone of the 7th density, level of existence can meditate and experience God. A merging with source consciousness is one of the greatest and most sublime abilities any soul can possess, they tell me. It is like expanding to the macro perspective to sense the collective of all life in the universe and to merge into it. This is described by many near-death experiences like the ones we've talked about on this channel for so long. However, the philosophy described thus far is named by some as dissolutionism. This is a name derived by the archangels. This is a different type of philosophy. My communicators from both Ashtar and the Angelic Order describe it thusly. Dissolutionism is a result of people who experience the oneness with God and believe it should be a permanent state of existence, and that does not mean being permanently allowing oneself to feel God, but as in permanently dissolved into God, to become, let's say, one with God until you as an individual no longer exist, which in fact is the exact opposite of what God wants. This is unfortunately just confusion. The counterpoint to this philosophy is called naturalism or spiritual naturalism. It is a return to the natural state of being God intended. Ashtar/Angelic Order communicator Minerva sums it up in her writings. It was never the intent of God to want souls to return into God and end their existences. We can return to God and experience the all as we wish, but this other path believes God's creations, the endless beautiful experiences of life, from our family and friends to our tiny but cherished experiences from eating food to walking in nature, are all material distractions. She continues in her writings, The final path of transcending all material attachment in this way is to ascend into Godhead. This has been espoused by some teachers on your earth to our great concern, as well as teachers everywhere. When this happens, you return to life as an elemental essence within the mind of God. However, you will essentially no longer exist. Well, this is true death. And, well, in essence, it can be permanent. I wouldn't say it is permanent because, well, the laws of karma are a little bit different. This is what I was informed later on. I got this bit wrong. So keep that in mind before anyone freaks out. It's still not a permanent thing. But if the timeline breaks and fractures, well, that would be permanent. Which is why this is such an important topic on this channel, because it's what I'm calling the timeline crisis, and that will be the title of my next book. So why this is a grave threat? My contacts make it clear that this has been a philosophical battle that has been waging for over 4 billion years, and they explain a few final and crucial points. The first point is that 2 divergent timelines now exist, one for those who support such a plan of dissolution, and another timeline for people who reject such a path and wish to live naturally in God's splendor. There is a crisis whereupon influencers are pushing people onto timeline A by trying to tell them this is the way it is. This is the philosophy. It's the only philosophy. There is no other path. I'm sure people watching know about this from reading so much spiritual literature. You may hear even certain influential mediums, even those quite recently, and yes, I'm talking about Suzanne Giesemann. They may say things like, there is no food, drink, sex, YouTube censors, gotta be careful what I say here, or material experience on the other side. We must transcend those things. So this is, in my communicator's perspective, a daisy chain. A daisy chain to renouncing anything short of absolute dissolution into God. It starts with that. It starts with saying we are going to miss food because there's no food. Then it goes on to saying there's no sex. It goes on to say, well, our whole bodies are things we should transcend. And then it'll eventually even say that our light bodies are things that we should transcend too, and we should just keep moving back as fast as we can into, well, back into God. But it's like they don't really know what God is, right? So that is the issue. There are many spirit guides and communicators on our earth who actually follow spiritual dissolutionism and influence us. This includes messages that basically drip and percolate into our society. It happens everywhere from Eastern religious writing to, well, a lot of popular books and authors. So that's sort of, in essence, where so much of my writing has come from, like the theme in my books dating all the way back to understanding life after death. And it's just amazing for all this information to just kind of come forth. Okay, so next slide. The reason this is the most horrific thing in our universe, Radiance explains, is that people, well, they pass away in your world, are taken away by guides who follow this philosophy, and they're led to basically actual individual extinction. At least that's how it used to be. Things have changed these days, so I'm told. This happens before they could ever even experience the true wonders of life in our worlds, the worlds that is beyond your earth. They go straight from a life on your world and then straight into the causal or mental planes, and then into God, where they merge and disappear. Alright, next slide, and I apologize if I'm beginning to look red around the face. It is summer in Arizona and I have no air conditioning on because my air conditioner sounds like a blast furnace and I have to keep it off. Alright, so my communicators explain something even more alarming. These two timelines, both mirrors of the other worlds, lead to very different experiences, even if someone skips on the mental or causal realms entirely. So in essence, it is unlikely you will experience your loved ones again if you join this particular timeline. The writings of both Radiance and Minarasa say, the timeline created for those who enter the path of dissolutionism is an unstable one, and is unlikely to last forever. Many changes to reality were made in that timeline, for it is almost like its own universe, as it is so different from our timeline. Natural restrictions like the spatial barriers found in webways during cosmic navigation were actually removed. So this would be akin to removing gravity. These are completely unnatural changes with the intent of removing hindrances to the advancement of consciousness. These changes were always made with some twisted form of good intent, but is creating an unstable reality that will ultimately collapse. So let's talk about why a new timeline was needed. Cut. Okay, let's continue with the next slide. So as for our reunions with loved ones. So this is the most heartbreaking part. You may not find your loved ones in that timeline if they choose the other timeline. Although to clarify, let me just, because I might have gotten this message a little bit wrong. So basically you will find your loved ones in that timeline, but the issue is if they don't go into the new timeline, then they're going to be stuck in the old timeline, right? So as a result, yeah, you'll be with your loved ones, but you're going to have to find a way to get them off that timeline and into the rescue timeline. And if they don't come with you, then I'm sorry to say, from what I've been told through my communications, unfortunately, you will be separated from them. So that's just something we got to keep in mind. So in essence, these timelines do not interpenetrate. You're either on one or the other. This does separate people from each other, but the good news is anyone from the dissolutionist timeline can, with intent and effort from our rescuers, come over to the new timeline, which is currently the primary timeline that most people arrive at. So what's the best case scenario? The best case scenario is everyone who truly believes we must dissolve into God can still enter that timeline and follow and do what they wish, knowing full well this is a universe that will inevitably collapse and destroy its inhabitants. However, everyone must know they can make an active choice which philosophy to follow. What is to us an abomination is the idea that people who don't know any better can be manipulated into entering an unstable timeline that will eventually destroy itself. Among both the Ashtar and the Angelic Order, and also among many, many other civilizations, my communicators say this is our greatest concern. And it involves not just your Earth, but realms across the billions of galaxies. So that's the end of the presentation. I know some of you guys may have to pick your brains up off the floor, but go ahead and tell me what you thought in the comments. And please be sure to consult your own guides, your own communications, your own friends and family in spirit to verify all this information. Don't just take my word for it. This is not a religion. This is not some kind of a group that wants to enforce some kind of spiritual faith. This is just the information that myself and actually many others that I've been talking to are receiving right now. So please do your own investigations. But in the meantime, don't forget to hit follow. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button. Don't forget to like the video, share the video, especially if you think people who, well, actually really anybody who has any interest in these subjects that needs to hear it. So pretty much that's it. Thanks again for watching. I really need a drink of water. Need to go to bed. It's been kind of a long evening getting this one out there, but I'm so happy to do it because I think it's so flippin' important. So thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you on the next video.